Hey everybody, this is Dan the Chess Enthusiast, and here I'm looking at another game that I played online not too long ago. I chose this game because I actually lost it. The first two videos that I posted were wins, but I also want to examine my losses because I think that you can learn a lot from your losses as well. So let's get started here. We have white opening with e4. I respond with the Sicilian. Knight out to f3, and here I just decide to throw the book out the window because I'm not very booked up on the Sicilian besides the open Sicilian and the Najdorf and the dragon variations. So I decided to just immediately go into a dragon type setup with pawn to g6. White pushes d4. We have a series of captures. I fianchetto the bishop, pawn to c3, pawn to d6, getting ready for a push into the center. Uh, Bishop to e2, knight f6, pawn f3, pawn push, knight back to b3, a6. Here, if we look at the position, this is actually kind of an odd combination of the dragon setup, which I have over here, getting ready to castle, and the Najdorf defense with the pawn to a6. Then we have bishop out to e3, knight c6, both sides castle. He immediately plays king to h1, getting it off of this diagonal leading into the castle position. With the dark square bishop sitting here right now, there's not much I can do to exploit this weakness in his position, but still just preemptively getting his king off of any checks for future checks at like an inopportune moment or something. Then we have pawn to d5, and here my opponent makes a small blunder and allows me to capture a pawn. He plays knight to a3, putting it on the rim of the board. From there, the knight doesn't really have many good squares to go to, and I go ahead and win a pawn in the following manner. If we go back, what I was expecting my opponent to do was to capture, and then I recapture. He could maybe play something like bishop to c5 to attack my rook and also get it away because it was being attacked by the knight. And I could play maybe rook to e8, and then he can play his knight out to d1, something like that. But instead, what we see is the loss of a pawn right here. He plays bishop to f3. I play knight back to f6. We exchange the queens right away. I think maybe a better move here would have been for me to capture with the rook because then I have control over the open d file. However, in moving the knight, excuse me, sorry about that. In moving the knight, I actually save the knight from the check here. I also don't want to split up my pawns, and I add another defender to the pawn here on b7. So play continues as follows. We have knight to c5. I play rook over to b8 because I want to be able to push this pawn to kick this knight off, and with my rook sitting here on a8, I wasn't able to do that. Then we have bishop to g5. I just ignore that and start to kick around the knight. We exchange the pieces on f6, knight back to e4 to attack the bishop, but I just pulled the bishop back. And I feel like this is a very workable position for me. I have the bishop pair, the board is fairly open, and I have a pass pawn on the e-file. However, pretty soon here you'll see that I made a big mistake that just gave me a lot of headaches and ultimately led to a resignation. So he moves his rook over the open d-file. I play knight to e6 to get it off the rim of the board. He plays knight to c4, and here I make my mistake that just kind of started it all downhill from here. I play knight to c5, and what happens is he of course captures the knight, and then when I recapture, I have two isolated pawns on the queen side as opposed to the three connected pawn majority for white. So this is a huge positional weakness, and as you'll see, I'm not able to correctly defend it as the game moves on, and I ultimately lose. If we go back though, I think a better move here for me would have been maybe something like bishop to b7. Because what could happen is now this pawn on b6, even though it looks like it can be captured, it's actually a poisoned pawn. Let's say the knight comes down and captures it. Well, I can capture the knight, and now I'm going to be up a piece because not only have I captured the knight, I'm attacking the bishop, and I'm attacking the knight here. Actually, I think for the best thing that white can do here is to just accept the fact that they've gone down a piece and finish off the exchange in the following manner. Because if they try to get tactically aggressive and play something like maybe knight to d7, trying to fork the rooks, well, what this allows me to do is capture the bishop on f3 and notice that I am attacking a rook as well. So if he captures one of my rooks, I get one of his rooks. Maybe the way we could continue from here is let's just say that he captures with the rook. Well, from here I can move my rook over to d8, and this knight actually cannot capture the rook sitting on b8, because if it does, then I capture the rook here, and that will be checkmate. Of course, he would have to block with his rook on the f-file, but then after that, I get my rook to f1, and that's checkmate. Alternatively, let's just say that he decides to capture with the pawn. Well, here I think actually I would be fine giving him back a little bit of material. I would capture on b2, he would capture my rook, I would recapture with the knight, and notice that in this position, I don't have a passed pawn yet, but he has 4 unconnected, isolated pawns, and I have a rook and 2 minor pieces versus 2 rooks. So technically I'm up in material in this position. I have to be a little more careful because connected rooks can be really dangerous. But, at the same time, I've got a lot of things going for me in this position. Finally, if we go back here, and let's just say he decides to capture one of my rooks. Let's just say he captures on f8. I can capture, he can recapture, I can capture the knight, and from here it's just totally a one game. I have a passed pawn, I'm up 2 pieces. This is not good for white. So all that could have come from the move bishop to b7 had I played it. However, as we saw in the real game, I played c5, and that resulted in 2 isolated pawns on the queen side, which really came back to bite me later. So play continues as follows, with him pushing the pawn to b3. I play pawn to a5. What I'm thinking at the time is I want to add another protector to this b4 square. Of course, what this does, though, is leaves the pawn hanging. So this was yet another big blunder. I think after I saw my mistake with getting the isolated pawns here, I got a little flustered and just wasn't thinking very clearly. He actually doesn't capture the pawn right away, though, and instead he plays bishop to d5. I play bishop to b7, just looking to get the bishops off the table, but now he goes ahead and captures the pawn. We exchange bishops, and when he brings his rook down, he's attacking this very, very weak isolated pawn on c5, and I'm, again, in a lot of trouble. What I play is rook on f over to c8. He just plays knight to c4. I play rook to a8. Of course, what this is doing is allowing him to come down and fork my rooks. However, I just wasn't thinking about that. And that's actually not what he does. What he does is he plays d6, attacking this rook. And, the knee-jerk reaction, which is what I played in the game, is to protect the rook, to save the rook, and to keep it in defense of this c5 pawn. So what I played was rook to c7. However, if we go back, I was wondering, what if I just give him the rook? How would that have worked out for me? Well, the line that I came up with actually didn't look too bad. It wasn't crushingly winning or anything, but it had a couple of possibilities. What I was thinking is maybe if I capture the pawn on a2 with my rook, he can capture my rook, and then I can just start pushing this pawn, because it is a passed pawn, and I have a rook on the 7th, so it's going to be kind of difficult for white to stop the pawn. He can maybe capture on c5. I can play a rook over to e2. He can just push the pawn. I can push my pawn to give the passed pawn a defender. He can maybe play pawn to b4, but in this position, actually, if I play bishop to f8, I'm going to win one of the 2 pawns. Let's just say that he moves the rook back to c7. Well, there goes the b pawn. He can maybe push to c5. I could push the pawn here to e3. He can maybe hit a check. I can just go over to f8 with my king. He can bring his knights to d5, forking both this passed pawn and this bishop. However, in this position, I can actually just push the pawn, and white is in a lot of trouble. There's no time to capture this bishop because once I capture the rook sitting here on f1, that's checkmate. Um, so maybe and also, the bishop here is in trouble. I'm sorry, the rook here is being attacked. So, maybe he could hit a check. I can pull the king over to safety, eventually get it over to h6, and then, to save the bishop, or I'm sorry, to save the rook, maybe he plays over to b1. But here, I just have kind of a quiet move, but a forcing move with uh, rook to d1. Again, there's no time to grab this bishop with either the knight or the rook, because if he moves the rook, one of these two pieces advances, the pawn would promote, and anyway, that would be checkmate. Alternatively, if he captures with the if he captures with the knight, well, then I can force the issue by moving rook to d1, and then that would allow me to get a queen on the board. So, that was just one variation. Of course, none of that is forced. It would have really depended on how play followed. But my point was that, in this position, could I have ignored the threat? It looks like maybe I could have. Again, it would have depended a lot on how play continued. But yeah. So in the game, again, I played rook to c7. He pushes the pawn to a4. I play rook to b8 to try to attack another pawn, really kind of ineffectually. He can play, he did play knight to b5, attacking the pawn. Attacking the rook. And from here, actually, I abandoned the defense of this pawn because I realized that defending it further is just going to give me a lot of headaches as long as this knight is in the vicinity. So instead, what I decided to do is start pushing this passed pawn as much as I can. He, of course, captures on c5. I start pushing the pawn. He plays rook over to e1. I push the pawn some more. King over to g1. Rook to d8. He plays knight to d4, and I play a really bad move. I totally miss the pin that's coming. I'm sorry, not the pin, the fork that's coming on c6 once the knight gets there. I play bishop to h6 because I want to give this pawn another defender. However, if we go back, a much better move by far obviously would have been to capture the knight. Once he captures with the pawn, I can capture with the rook, and he can maybe consolidate his rooks on the first rank and play c1, and I can start pushing the pawn. Here on the f-file, I'm going to get another defender for this pawn. This is a totally workable position. Instead, what we see is, if I go back here, we see after the knight comes to d4, bishop to h6, and that just allows a really nasty pin. From here, it's pretty much game over. We play on a little bit more because I do have that passed pawn, so I don't want to just abandon all hope immediately. But from here, I play rook to d7. He captures with check. I recapture. I'm just going to flip through the remaining moves because I'm under time constraints here. He plays king to f1. I move the rook. He moves his rook up to c8. I play rook to d1. He tries to force the exchange of rooks, but I hit a check. He just pulls the king over. I start trying to attack these pawns here, but I'm just not able to really get anything going here. This is kind of a wasted move. I don't know what I was thinking, because after pawn to g3, the bishop just goes back. And then at this point, he just captures the passed pawn because he realizes that, after the exchange, this is still a one position. He has these 3 connected passed pawns on the queen side. This is just monstrous. And he just doesn't want to have to put up with this passed pawn and have to worry about it anymore. So a smart move from white. A little bit more positioning we see here. But once we get to this position, I actually just resign because I realize there's nothing I'm going to be able to do to stop all of these pawns from advancing. And this is going to be pretty hopeless game from here. So like I said, I lost the game. I was a little disappointed because I felt that I played really well in the opening. But what happens. And in analyzing this game, I hope that I don't make any more silly mistakes like allowing pins and forks and all that kind of stuff. And I hope you enjoyed watching the game as well. All right. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care. Bye.